Welcome, everyone, to the Unfiltered podcast, real conversations about church planting. My name is Lee Stevenson. I'm a local church planter in the Orlando City area and overseer of Converge church planting.
I'm Danny Parmalee, and I oversee church planting for Converge, Mid-America, and Southeast.
And I'm excited. We've got a special guest with us today. This is Wes Pastor, a church planter, an academic creator there in the Northeast. So, Wes, why don't you tell us, where are you at, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yes, thanks, Lee. It's good to be on the program today. We are up in the People's Republic of Vermont.
Great way to put it.
And we moved up there under the auspices of what was then the Baptist General Conference, Converge, in 1991 to plant a church. There were no Converge churches in Vermont at the time. That's why they asked us to go. And so
you fell for it.
I fell for it. I know. I fell for it. And we went up to the Burlington area, which is in the northwest corner of Vermont, pretty close to Canada, and launched in September of 1992, Christ Memorial Church. And I had the privilege of serving as a senior pastor for that church for 30 years. And so this past September just handed that off to one of my associates, in fact, one of the folk that have come through our church planting and revitalization program.
Incredible. What was it for you about Burlington that caught your attention and said, yeah, this is the place that we feel like God is leading us to plant?
Well, first, New England, and, again, stats need to be taken with somewhat of a grain of salt, but according to all of the stats, Barna, all the guys, New England is the most unchurched area in the country, and it's the closest to post-Christian. So it's the most Europe-like, it's the most Canada-like, and so I was attracted by that. I was also attracted by its rich heritage. New England has an extremely rich Christian heritage. I'm a kind of a Jonathan Edwards guy. And I was attracted by the colleges. I got saved when I was a student at Ohio State University. I saw the power of campus ministry, so we were looking to plant churches in college towns. And Burlington is where the University of Vermont, which is the flagship university in Vermont, is located.
You strike me as a man that likes the challenge, and you stepped up to reach that challenge. I also think it's incredible. Like, you spent 30 years at the church you planted. A lot of our church planters that are listening to this are even on those early stages where maybe they haven't even launched the church, let alone know how the future is going to play out. What is one or two pieces of advice that you would give to a new church planter about what it looks like to make it the long haul?
As to how to make it the long haul, is that?
Yeah.
First of all, just in terms of why to even have that as a value, because I do understand you could have different approaches to this. Some call it a more apostolic approach, catalyst approach. I think is the way the Southern Baptists talk about it. One of the reasons I wanted to do it this way is we have 5 kids, and in all of our journey, we had moved. At one point, I calculated we'd moved 12 times in 13 years.
Wow.
And so I said to my wife, look, whenever it is we decide where we're going, sweetheart, we're not moving. Even if it fails, I'll get another job. We're going to raise our kids in a stable place. And I'm not making a God out of that, but I think it's helpful for passing the happy wife test, and just generally having a relatively stable family. So that's sort of an advertisement for trying to do that. I think that if you're going to be successful, you have to be willing to be adaptable, because the church that you plant in a lot of non-essentials will not be the church you retire from. And I don't particularly consider me a naturally adaptable person, but my wife would be laughing right now. She's like that's the understatement of the universe. But I'm committed to the principle of adaptation. And so, and we've gone through a lot of different phases, and we don't look like we looked like in what I would call the non-essentials. And just being also able to not allow the hits to discourage you. Because if you're going to be in a pastorate for that long, I mean, the Methodists are pretty smart.
They just keep
changing
them
them.
up.
And I was talking to a Methodist leader, and he said, we want to move in because we know problems will happen, so we'll just start over again.
Yeah.
I see it. I don't agree with it. I
Sure.
think, well, how did your people ever learn how to work through problems? Because, you have a honeymoon stage. Even the initial part, and you know this, Lee, from planting. Have you planted?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Andy, yeah, you guys both know that it can be a little rough at the beginning. The people you think are loyal, they leave, but usually that's not too terribly painful. I find it's the 20-year betrayals that really leave you just, gasping for air. So I think you have to be prepared that you're going to get hit, you're going to get sucker punched, and you have to recognize this is just New Testament Christianity. And the devil doesn't like successes, and he doesn't like the gospel going forward. He's going to use methods and means that you could have never even imagined. They don't tell you about this stuff in seminary. I mean, it's just, you got to read it in the New Testament. That's where it is.
Yeah. Wes, I have a question for you. When you planted, did you have a specific intentional plan for multiplication? So a lot of church planters say, hey, I'm going to plant this church, and then I'm also going to plant, 5 to 10 churches, out of my church. And, you've been very successful in multiplication. So I want you to talk about nets a little bit, but I want to know if that was part of the plan in the beginning, or if that's something that kind of grew out of whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Not only was it a plan to plant churches, it was a plan to start some sort of a church planting school or training center.
Okay.
That was right in the beginning. That is really courtesy of one of my mentors at Dallas Seminary, John Hanna, who had shown how through the various awakenings, especially the first great awakening, there was usually a training school that emerged from that. That's how Dartmouth started, for instance. And so I just had it in my mind, well, we're not having an awakening, but we can still try to set the table and get gospel preachers. And so right from the beginning, we wanted to both plant churches and we wanted to start some kind of a training center. We weren't exactly sure what that was, but we knew we wanted to do it. So
how quickly did you, and tell us about it and where it's at today?
Yeah, so. and just an encouragement to church planters. I know that church revitalization is really hot these days. Yeah. I've seen it because I've been recruiting for about 25 years. Yeah. But one of the great advantages of church planting is you can set that DNA right from the beginning, and you guys know that. You're not having to deal with trying to turn a slow-moving ship. And if someone comes and they say they don't like it, you can just always say, "Well, I was here first."
Yeah,
exactly. We 3 years out. So we started in 92, 95. We started looking for our first church planter. And we finally located him in 97. We signed him in 97. And we specifically said, we want you to plant in Hanover, New Hampshire, where Dartmouth College, which is an Ivy League school, is located. He came up in 98. We did our pilot residency program from 98 to about a year and a half, just short of a year and a half. Sent him out at the end of 99, and he planted Christ Redeemer Church in 2000. Okay. And that was enough for us to see, okay, we think the residency program idea, which was not hot at the time.
Right, I was going to say, everything are total buzzwords, but back then, no one was doing that.
No, the district opposed it because it was too expensive.
Yeah.
And I had good relationships with my district. I love my district executive minister, but they thought they were doing 1 week boot camps.
Yeah.
And that was like, they've already been to seminary. The 1 week boot camp is totally sufficient. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't think so. And I think you prove that because you're not willing to fund this thing.
Right.
So you're not really convinced this guy's a good guy. We're going to take him through this program, and then we're going to get behind him because a laborer is worthy of his wages, and a church planter needs more, not less, than an established planter or an established pastor. So we jumped in with both feet in 2000 residency. And I had the privilege, Lee, you were at the meeting when they had the think tank, and President Rideout said, we want to get, I think he said 100 residency programs. So I got to see the thing go full circle, because back then nobody was talking residency programs.
So tell us how it's grown since then. So
we started slowly. We were getting about one couple on average every 2 years. And that's about all we could afford.
Yeah.
Even though we set Nets up as a separate organization, it's under the auspices of Christ Memorial Church. It's legally a controlled corporation,
Okay.
but it has its own board of directors who are responsible for its day-to-day operations. We kind of have the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
But slowly but surely, we begin to get a little momentum, and our churches were working. We didn't have any failures early on. That really helped because our people believed in it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The biggest breakthrough happened in 2014 or 2015, so we're about 15 years into it. When I went to the elders, because I was turning 60, I went to the elders. I said, this thing is kind of revolving around me, so I'm kind of assuming when I retire, this will probably, ride out into the sunset. And the elders said, we don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
What do we need to do to not have that happen? I said, well, we probably need to get our own space because right now we're just sort of a cottage industry of Christ Memorial Church. They were all for it. And lo and behold, a campus came available.
Which is beautiful.
It is a beautiful. That's right.
Yeah.
Lee's been up there. It had actually been in receivership for about 5 years at that point. It had gone bankrupt. The bank owned it. And so we began pursuing that campus. The elders gave us our blessing, even though they're not responsible for those kind of decisions. But they're overall responsible for Nets, so they were excited about it. The board gave us our approval to go after this property, and we negotiated for about 1.5 years on the property, just getting it down,
Yeah.
really helping the bank to face the music.
Right.
Nobody's
No
going
one's
to
coming
needs
knocking.
that.
That's right. There were
Because
two,
that had housing, dorms.
Yes.
Right.
Gymnasium,
Gymnasium, yep.
but they also had a zoning board that said it can only be used for this very
Right.
narrow purpose,
Yeah.
and it'll take you 1.5 years and about $60,000 to get approval even for that,
Yeah.
because it had been grandfathered in, and then they changed.
You were the
the
only
zoning.
real buyers
that's
for
the,
it. So.
That's New England.
Yeah,
So-
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. That's very New England. So we were able to do it. We negotiated it down to an unbelievable price, and we purchased it in 2016 with the goal of trying to. Our mindset is, kind of go big or go home. We want to saturate the New England landscape, which is so in need of gospel preachers and gospel churches with gospel preaching men.
Mhm.
And we can't do that if we're sending out one every 2 years. And I'm not saying there's nothing else going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good things going
Yeah.
on, but it's paltry. The average attendance at evangelical churches in New England is 2 to 4%. In Rhode Island, it's 1.6% of the population that attends evangelical churches. So there's plenty of room to send guys out. So we're now trying to get up to 8 to 10 a year coming into our program.
Phenomenal.
We're in the 3 to 5 range, which is a vast improvement over what we were doing one every couple of years.
Yeah.
But we've still got room there to do it and still keep it a hands-on mentoring apprenticeship program.
Yeah.
We're not trying to replicate seminary.
Yeah.
And what are you looking for, Wes, when it comes to a good candidate that both fits a church planter or a revitalization profile in New England, and also to be a part of Nets? What are the qualifications? What are
Yes.
you looking for?
Yeah, on the sort of lifestyle side of things, we're looking for guys that are robust physically, robust mentally. We're a little selective. If a couple has issues where they need to be on some sort of special medications, especially for anxiety or depression, we don't in any way say those folk aren't qualified to be in the ministry, but we just know the strain of New England is probably not in their best interest. And we've had couples really appreciate that we try to
Honest
be
with
very
them and-
careful and in a kind way. So we're looking for dudes. They've got to be able to bear weight and kind of I think of Marlon.
Yeah.
Here's a guy I know, and I'm sure Terry was right there with him. These people are weight bearers, and they're not going to easily get knocked off course. So we're kind of looking for that. We're looking for folk that are theologically driven. we come from a Reformed point of view, so we're looking for that. Although we're not grinding any axes about any of that. One of our guys calls it Calvinism with a smile, and I think that's appropriate because a lot of times
it's not.
Those guys are not very friendly.
Well put. Yeah.
And so we want most of all that they see the gospel as the central thing, that they're committed to telling people that they're sinners, they need a Savior. Jesus Christ is the only Savior, the only name under heaven which by we can be saved, and that they're not going to depart from that script.
Yeah.
And they're going to recognize that they're going to need to be leaders. That's going to be hard at times, and they need to come up to New England and die. Yeah. That's what we say. If you're going to be a part of Nets, we're expecting you to come up here and die. If that's not what you want to do, there are a lot of other options, and we wish you the best, but we're not going to go there. That doesn't mean everybody does, right. But that's the commitment we're asking them to have. And we want their wives to be right there with them. Yeah. Not just, well, this is what my husband wants to do. Mm-hmm. We say, that's not going to work. It isn't going to work. You can do that in a regular church pastorate in a lot of places, but not church planting in New England.
You were, a lot of times I think people would think they have to be from the Northeast in order to be effective, but you were sharing yesterday at dinner that you do have people that aren't originally from there that, join the program. And, I've talked to, some of the, the planters and revitalizers you had come through have had just a great experience. What does that experience look like, and can they be from, anywhere?
What does the experience of someone from the South planting in the North look like?
Actually,
or being
both.
At Nets?
Being at Nets.
Okay.
Being at Nets.
Yeah, it's not a requirement at all. And, New England is so liberal that they're pretty accepting. They really are pretty accepting. I'm amazed at how open-minded they are. They're not discerning, but they're very open-minded.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So no, we've got a number of guys. I mean, a lot of the seminaries are in the South that I recruit from. Yeah. So you're getting Southern folk. The guy that took my place is from South Georgia. Now he was so missionally minded that he taught himself not to have a Georgia accent. You would never know he's from Georgia. Wow. Now you talk to his wife, you'd know.
It comes out.
I met him because he went through assessment.
Oh, that's right. Down in San Antonio or down in Denton, Texas, I think it was.
Yep,
That's right. Am I right?
Yep.
You couldn't tell, could you?
Yeah.
And he was in journalism and he was a sports announcer, so he had a lot of chances to perfect it. But you would never know, except he's an Atlanta Braves fan and he loves the Georgia Bulldogs. He went to Georgia. He named his firstborn Georgia.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he's all
subtle,
in then.
Subtle hints.
Yeah. But what does the experience look like? So, and this is literally a free commercial opportunity. There's a listener out there right now. Now, Lee and I get the commission on this if they sign up for Nets.
You got it.
But if someone says, "Hey, what does that actually look like to be part of Nets and to be what happens during that time? How long is it? And then when they're sent out?"
Yes. Well, maybe from the downside, let's just get the bad news out of the way first. They're probably going to be busier than they ever were in the church that they attended. We're pretty high octane. We have a lot of outreach ministries, and we expect them to be at everything. Now, part of that is a conditioning drill,
which
because
makes sense. Yeah.
we know they're going to have to step up. So the typical reaction we get, especially from a Southern culture person who might have a little more laid back orientation, is that this is really busy or this is really intense. But they adapt. They get used to that. The other, what could be viewed as bad news, actually the couples end up viewing it as pretty good news, is we're gonna drill down pretty deeply into their married lives. And because we know if they go out there and those marriages aren't humming, that they can work through problems quickly, satisfactorily, mutually satisfactorily, they're going to be in trouble because it's the stress of it is going to bring out the weaknesses. And so sometimes it can get a little uncomfortable when we start drilling down, and because we're usually drilling down into their spiritual lives. Yeah. That's really what it is, and it's just manifesting itself in marriage and family issues. those are kind of the hard parts. I think the parts that they actually really enjoy and spend most of the time doing, we have a big couples aspect to it. And once they get over the exposure issue, they really end up giving real high marks on how helpful it is for their marriages. So we're spending time with them individually. We spend regular time with the couples. We spend time with them individually as a couple, and just working through all sorts of things. We have a curriculum that we go through with marriage and family matters. And then the guys, we're pounding the guys on studying texts, preparing exegetical, homiletical outlines, preparing 45-minute sermon manuscripts. Now, they don't have to do that when they get out, but we're trying to develop some disciplines and help them to really figure out what it looks like to be preaching every week. So even if they're not preaching, we try to get them preaching once a month at a church.
Great.
But even if they're not preaching, they're still preparing sermons, because to just suddenly become the senior pastor when you did 2 15-minute sermonettes in seminary,
Big jump.
It's a big jump, and you're just not conditioned to be doing that kind of prep every week. So we're trying to work that muscle and get it. It's still not going to be conditioned, but it's going to be more conditioned than they would have been otherwise.
Now, is the whole process, is it a 6 months, 1 year, 2 year kind of process?
Right. The immediate intensive is 9 months. And from that 9-month scenario, there's 3 or 4 options they can choose. One, some have decided they don't think they should go into ministry. And we're giving them our own evaluations. They're coming to an assessment center like this. They're getting that evaluation. We put all that together. We make an end-of-the-year evaluation. And sometimes they've already concluded, we don't think we're suited for ministry. They might take a position just at an established church that's relatively healthy. That may be in New England, maybe not. They don't have to agree to stay in New England just for this 9-month intensive. That's a second option. A third option is to go into a church revitalization. And there's a spectrum there. Some of those are really fairly healthy. They just don't have any young people.
That makes sense.
So the older folk want to get a young pastor thinking that that'll enable them to recruit, which is true. We've seen that happen several times. So that's a third option. The fourth option is to church plant. If they decide to do that and they want to do that with nets, they have to stay on for another 18 to 24 months for our residency program. And there we have them sign in blood.
You're all in.
You're all in. If you can't say you're planning to stay in New England, we're not, we'll try to get you affiliated with somebody else. That's right. And happily. Right. But if you want to be with Nets, which includes...
I'll take your leftovers.
Which includes all of the funding that Nets does. We have our own graphic designer. We have our own videographer. We have our own editor. We produce... Our materials look a lot better than Nets actually is. And we're better on paper.
There went that commercial.
There went that commercial. That's right.
I told him to sell it. He's like, this is what sucks. You're gonna have long days, hard hours. I'm like, wow, Wes, way to sell that.
Right. But the good news is for the 9-month intensive, it's free housing, free utilities. We give them $1,000 a month. So we're really taking care of them. We're investing. Their insurance, we have a self-insurance pool, so they'll never pay more than $3,000 on their deductible, because they all come up and have babies.
Right.
So
once you're not keeping them busy,
it's in the water or something. It's like you're pregnant. We got 4 pregnancies, going on in our self-insurance pool, going right down. But we do take care of them. We take care of them, and we're behind them 1,000%. The first church we planted in Dartmouth, they're trying to get a building, and they bought 9 acres in Hanover 5 or 6 years ago. Now, Hanover has not had a new church building since 1959.
Wow.
And they bought property that was zoned correctly. There's no issues. They went through the planning commission, no issues. They said they could build a building that seats 600 people. Their church already is getting 400 out, which is great for New England.
Oh, it's huge.
Then they went to the zoning board, and the zoning board said, you can't do a number of things, all of which are now being challenged in court. Yeah. And we are helping them fundraise for all of those costs, and we've raised a lot of money. 20 years after planting, So one of our motto is for the life of the church.
Yeah.
So we're behind you, and we're going to help you. We want you to be denominationally active. It's one of the best Converge churches in the Northeast, this church I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you know Don. And but we're behind you. And so there's some real nice perks. It's a long-term relationship.
Wes, I really appreciate you taking the time to share both your heartbeat. It's contagious, your passion for New England to come and understand the truth of the gospel. And so we appreciate what you're doing.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate
Lee,
you
thank
pouring
you.
into all the planters and churches in the area.
Thank you very much, Lee.
It's a blessing. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. This has been the Unfiltered podcast, just real conversations about church and church planning. Thanks for tuning in.